It's going to take some balls to make it through this game. I wanted to cover something old this time and maybe a little bit obscure, and thought back to what I've played and not seen appear on my YouTube feed. Well, that does not make it necessarily obscure, but I'm fairly confident that Run Like Hell is fairly unknown amongst most of gaming. This game was so obscure that when I went to sell my copy decades ago at a GameStop, they would not take it. They couldn't even find a number or a UPC for it. It was not in any system at the time, or database, or anything of that sort. To compound how obscure this game is, I tried playing it on my Xbox Series X, and it said it was not supported. Even after Microsoft went through all the effort to make a bunch of original Xbox titles playable on the Xbox Series X. I no longer have an original Xbox, so my only hope of playing it again was my Xbox 360. Unfortunately, I was not recording at the time because I sort of expected it to work. But when I inserted the disc, the 360 displayed a message that the game was not supported, and I almost gave up. But an update popped up on the 360, and after downloading it, the game started. I'll admit, I was a bit surprised that the game and the system were still supported. So, in a rare moment, I will praise Microsoft for still having the servers up for that. So, what is Run Like Hell? It's classified as a third-person shooter and adventure game. I wouldn't quite label it as an adventure game, but more of a third-person shooter mixed with a bit of action adventure and some horror mixed in. I guess the best comparison is the Aliens movie. There are horror elements to the movie, but also a great deal of action as well. Let's go over some details of the game. It was developed by Digital Mayhem, a subsidiary of Interplay Entertainment, which also worked on the game. It was released in 2002 on the PS2 and on the Xbox in 2003. It is one of two games developed primarily by Digital Mayhem, with Hunter the Reckoning being the other title they developed. There are three other titles Digital Mayhem worked on as well, and two of them are of some note. MDK2, the sequel to MDK, and Giants Citizen Cabruto, which was created by Nick Brutti, one of the people behind the Earthworm Jim games. MDK, the Genesis version of Aladdin, and a whole slew of other titles I'm sure people recognize. Unfortunately, he did not work on Run Like Hell. Run Like Hell feels more like an amalgamation of ideas borrowed from various movies and games, with a bit of originality that does stick out just a bit. It also has some of the roughest and most sudden transitions I have ever seen. It had a bit of a rough development with multiple lead producers, lead programmers, lead artists, leave smack dab in the middle of the game or over the course of 5 years, where they switched it from a survival horror to more of an action game, with the original intent of it being more like Resident Evil in space. And the programming was done in the space of 10 months, because they scrapped everything and started over again, and why some of the characters and lore feel deeper than the actual gameplay. It was actually supposed to be part of a trilogy, and spoiler alert, that didn't happen. With that, let's get into it. The game starts out with our main character, Nick Connor, doing a voiceover of a battle between two forces. I have no idea who they are and why they are fighting. There might be something in the manual, but my copy was missing the manual. It transitions to the start screen, and when I start a new game, I have the option of starting with a prologue or going right into chapter 1. I chose to go with the prologue. It starts with a screen with a Shakespeare quote from the Twelfth Night. This screen reminds me of the first screen in Eternal Darkness with the Edgar Allan Poe quote. It then has an in-game engine cutscene of a monster of some kind approaching Nick, who is stuck in some fleshy substance. When the alien strikes, it transitions into a cinematic rendering used for most of the game's cutscenes. Nick is sitting at his desk, and his fiancée Samantha comes to see him, and I am borderline not sure if I can show her due to her state of dress, but because I'm not monetized, I'll risk it. The scene does not make sense, especially in light of the layout of the dwelling, which you get to see in a minute or two, but let me get to that later. Samantha comes to comfort him, and we get an explanation that he has issues with nightmares stemming from his time in the war. She then reminds Nick of the shooting lesson that he promised her.
Early to teach me how to shoot, remember? You've been promising for weeks and you aren't going to back out of it because of some nightmare.
An alert pops up on his monitor of a supply ship being attacked by unknown ships, and Samantha goes off in a direction that also does not make sense after he tells her to get dressed due to the attack. Sam then calls Nick and is pulled into an invisible portal and disappears. Nick wakes up again. So they had a dream inside a dream? I almost think they had two beginnings to the game and just slapped them together because of how much the first dream does not fit into the dialogue or setting of the following cutscene. Or maybe the dream of the monster attacking him was supposed to come later, but because of reasons they put it there. I'm not entirely sure, but it seems out of place. Nick wakes up again and you gain control of him. Here, you get introduced to the basics like the exclamation marks showing you can interact with something in the environment. You can also see the layout of his quarters. Remember what direction Sam came from in the previous cutscene? She would have to come from the kitchen and not the bedroom unless she was just watching him awkwardly while in the kitchen. Then when she leaves to go put clothes back on, she heads back into the kitchen. I'm not entirely sure the developers were paying attention when they made the cutscene. After stepping out into the hallway, Nick lets the player know every soldier has a communication implant in their ear, and you can see it in Nick's ear. I'll give him credit for that. He has two messages, one from Sam reminding him of the promised shooting lesson, and also what I think is an attempt at a red herring. Or maybe just original story, I'm not entirely sure. The other is from a woman named Amanda about getting some samples of plutonium from an asteroid. Now, some of you may have your mind in the gutter, and there is no love triangle angle or three-something happening here. Although Nick will be getting some head from Amanda, but not the way you think. Now that I can control Nick, I walk around the station, and after I round a corner, I came across what led me to the title of this video. A vending machine that sells nothing but Bawls energy drink. Yet some of you probably, if you don't see the thumbnail, I didn't mean like the genitals. No, that's the name of an energy drink. Yeah, I think it used to be popular. I'm not entirely sure. I could only get it online or at Hy-Vees. And I was going to do a bit where I would get them, but the closest Hy-Vee is really far away, so it's not really worth it for the bit. After rating the machine for the drink, I then go for the snack machine next to it and get a Pip-Boy bar. One thing I noticed when I went to Nick's inventory was, one, that the Bawls energy drink was the same blue bottle and acts as a health item. But the other thing that caught me off guard was the Pip-Boy bar. For some of you, this may have caused your gamer senses to go into alert mode. When I go to the bar, there is a Vault Boy from the Fallout series with a ripped sleeve with a gigantic flexing arm. Before anyone asks, it was developed by Interplay Entertainment, who developed the Fallout series till Bethesda got their dirty hands on it. One thing I did forget to mention is where you progress through the game, you are sent a message every time for every little thing. This mail icon will appear each time and float just above Nick's head until you go into the menu for the message and scroll down to it. It happened so much I was going crazy, constantly pausing and navigating to the message just so I can get the mail icon to go away. After discovering the vending machines and going through a bar where I picked up another Bawls energy drink to get to the elevators, and I come across another room with more vending machines of Bawls energy drinks. After grabbing more balls, I take Nick down the elevator, and I'm relieved that I do not have to interact with the elevator controls, and the game takes control. After you get out of the elevator, you're in another room with more Bawls energy drink vending machines. So again, I collect even more balls and walk down a hallway where I meet Niles, the station's head engineer, who looks like a discount elf. You can also meet Niles' son, Jesse, in the previous room, but you can completely miss him if you don't talk to him, which is easy to do because most of the NPCs do not interact with Nick. So I didn't actually bother trying to talk to him until I had to start over. And that was mainly due to the fact that my recording software was being difficult, but that's neither here nor there. Niles had to take the main elevator down for maintenance, but you also get a feel that Nick is some kind of unofficial figure. They call him Captain Nick, but there are others over him in the chain of command. I'm sure they are trying to establish that inhabitants of the station look to him for leadership. After talking to Niles, Nick goes to the shooting gallery down the hall, and this whole thing is an armorer's worst nightmare, having a shooting range directly connected to a rec area. Before Nick gives Sam her lesson, she drags him to a room very similar to that of a holodeck from Star Trek, or maybe the VR missions from Metal Gear Solid. Either way, it feels similar but copyright safe. Sam has Nick play a game her brother made, and it's nothing more than a tutorial on the mechanics of the game. Most of them you will only use once or twice. Nick deactivates a force field and then activates a robot that suspiciously looks like Johnny 5 if you order it from Timu. Or Timu, whatever it is, I don't care. Nick then goes through the hall and interacts with a terminal where you learn the password to open a locked door by inputting the correct buttons. This mechanic will be used the most in the game. And not to mention you'll be going through a lot of hallways. I mean, it is a space station. After unlocking the door, Nick is given a gun and you learn how targeting, shooting, and dodging works. Nick, for the most part, cannot miss as long as he has line of sight. After shooting some armored mech-looking suits, Nick just goes to a corner and interacts with one of the yellow exclamation marks to get out of the VR. No terminal, no door, just an exclamation mark in the corner of the room. He then goes to teach Sam how to shoot with the explanation that the targeting system shows where the bullets will hit. This is nothing more than to teach the player how to shoot the guns and change targets again under the guise of teaching Sam how to shoot. Sam then shoots 4 shots, with the 5th making the sound of a gun with an empty magazine, but there's still a muzzle flash.
Let me try. Wow. Well, that was easy.
Yeah, wait till you fire a 2-ton nuke launcher.
Never mind Nick and Sam's disregard for basic gun safety. Nick calls the target, and the target is Nick. The couple then proceeds to make out in the gun range, with Amanda showing up asking if they were there while standing in the middle of a broad hallway with a full view of the range. The station must be cold everywhere. Amanda lets Nick know about the lifts being fixed, and they set off down the hall to a bigger cafeteria kind of room with 6 Bawls vending machines. I'm not going to point out every vending machine, but I did count them, and Nick will pass by 34 machines by the time the game is over. Some are repeats, but in different chapters. Advertising in games was not new at this point. It's been in games that came out before, in the same year, and definitely after. With soap shoes in Sonic Adventure 2, which I can't get a video on because the only one I could find on was Watch Mojo, and I'm not copying their video. Timex Clip Watch in Tomb Raider Angels of Darkness. Powerade in Enter the Matrix. Tons of items in Pikmin 2. Every battery in Alan Wake, being an Energizer, along with a achievement for watching a Verizon commercial on a TV in the game.
One access to thousands of applications.
Let's not forget Monster Energy Drink in Death Stranding, and the Mercedes in Mario Kart 8, as well as Coleman in Final Fantasy 15. There are more, and I'm sure there will be more in the future. In this room, you meet Craig, a drunken miner that starts to get rough with a scientist you can meet in a room before this one, but you won't find out his name till later. After Nick takes down the drunken miner, Dagrek is introduced. I have no idea what Dagrek is. This whole game has a lore I know nothing about in terms of the different species on the station and their relationship to each other and the station. I checked, and as far as I can tell, it is not based off of any established sci-fi series. Dag is the head of security, and I'm under the impression that most of the security members are the same lizardmen. Nick and Dag yuck it up, and then Nick heads to one of the hangars in one of the most sudden loading transitions I have ever seen. Just watch. You go from walking to a load screen to just being in a cutscene in the hangar with the commander of the station. I'm going to let part of this scene play so that people who know who voice the characters or like, I know that voice, who is that, can go nuts.
Be that as it may, we need the shuttle back by 2100 tonight.
Will do. We should be back before that.
This game has some talent behind it. Nick is voiced by Lance Henriksen. Dagrek is voiced by Clancy Brown. The commander is voiced by Michael Ironside. There's Tom Wilson, who you might know as Biff from Back to the Future. Brad Dourif, you might recognize him as Wormtongue from the Lord of the Rings movies, as well as the voice of Chucky from the Child's Play series / Chucky series. Kate Mulgrew, who played Captain Janeway in Star Trek Voyager, and there's a lot of other well-established voice actors in this game. Back to the game. Nick and Amanda leave on the shuttle, and I want you to pay attention to the scene as they are leaving. There are multiple things wrong with it in general, but I want the viewers to pay attention to the screen or cockpit here. The other part is when Nick passes a supply ship, the same one from his dream, and they were not subtle here at all. They just transition into the ship and you see the same discount xenomorphs from Nick's first dream in the ship. They didn't even try to hide it. I almost thought they were going to use the life forms that Sam found on the nearby planet as a red herring, but nope. Nick has a monologue stating that he's on edge and has no idea why. Whoever decided to do the previous scene threw that out into the vacuum of space, making the whole monologue pointless. As Nick and Amanda return to the station, I want you to remember the scene where they left. When Nick and Amanda return to the station, I want you to remember the scene where they departed from the station.
It is. Although I spend so much time up here, I sometimes forget it.
Now let's take a look when they return.
The station, this is Shuttle 1. Permission to dock.
Yes, the developers used the same scene for Nick returning and leaving the station. After Nick contacts the station and there's no answer, he is somehow still able to enter the shuttle bay and land. Nick then goes to a monitor to look at the security footage. While asking what happened and ignoring the pools of blood everywhere, Amanda stays by the shuttle asking Nick what's going on while Nick checks the cameras. He sees a bunch of bodies and the camera is taken out. Out of nowhere, a giant alien drops from the top of the shuttle bay. Why the shuttle bay is that large, I have no idea. But it lands on the shuttle, damaging it. And Amanda just stays there, screams while it grabs her and gets some head. It then tosses what's left of her to the side and gives Nick some head while he awkwardly watches. This next part is where I expect the game got its title. Nick does his lamest Crash Bandicoot impression and runs down the hallway. Here you control Nick going around debris in the way. But there is one mechanic they do warn you about, but there are some issues with it. There will be times when you have to hit Y to jump over obstacles or A to slide under them. The problem is you have to push either button before you even see the obstacles, meaning you have to guess or get lucky if this is your first time attempting it, or fail and remember what button to push next time. Speaking of failure, this game has the most non-lackluster game overs I have ever seen. Just watch when I fail this hallway scene. That's it. Nick just lets out a small yell and dies. This happens whenever he dies. I know not to expect something like Dead Space with multiple gory deaths, but older games at least did something when you fail and the character dies. Also, this mechanic is used only one more time in the game. There is very little running from anything in this game. When Nick gets to the end of the hallway, Dag Rex shoots him, and the alien almost grabs him, but Dag shoots some explosives. That again, I want you to pay attention to. I mean, really pay attention to. I'm doubting anyone's going to remember this, but I will point it out later. It causes an explosion which opens a hole in the station and starts to suck Nick out, but Dag helps him before the area is sealed off. Nick gets upset that Dag shot him, and his excuse is that he thought Nick was the alien. This is Nick. This is the alien. But also Nick is confused as to how he shot him because there is some lore they did not tell you about or even bother to explain, and is explained away by Dag saying it was his personal weapon. Dag fills Nick on what is going on and calls the big alien a brute and the smaller ones that you saw in the cutscene cutters, and then gives him a rifle like the one used in the prologue. The brute starts to make it through the door and both of them make their way to a door down a hallway. Like I said, there's just a lot of hallways in this game. But the door is jammed and they need a crowbar. Nick leaves Dag at the door to find a crowbar. This is how the gameplay loop works, for the most part. The act starts and Nick needs to get somewhere, and he follows a fairly linear path to get to an object or person needed to progress before moving on to a boss fight, with plenty of aliens in between. I'm not even through the first chapter at this point, and I am 5 pages into the script. I've tried long form content in the past and it did not go well, probably because I'm just not entertaining. But this game has struck a chord with me to the point where I have to do the whole thing. So I will see you next time when I complete Act 1 and go into Act 2. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Have a good one.